when I see that modeled correctly, I don't see it failing. I
Got
see
it.
it being hard, very hard.
Yeah.
It's
Oh
very
yeah.
hard for me to do all
Yeah.
the time, but I don't see it failing.
100% of the proceeds gained from this monetized episode will be donated to sciencesaves.org. Thanks for listening. Adam Bush, thank you
Yes.
so much for joining me on my podcast today. I'm stoked to
Yes.
have you.
Happy to be here.
So the way that I was first kind of introduced to your work was I am a member of what is called the Clean Comedy Collective in Nashville, Tennessee. And basically what we do is we just kind of make an effort to promote more clean open mics and clean showcases for audiences that just that way they know that they can feel safe coming on a date, like a first date from an app or bringing a relative or something like that. And you gave us a shout out.
I did. Yeah.
It was really, really cool.
I found you guys somewhere. I mean, obviously online, maybe, from some other Nashville comic that I follow or something.
It was probably Drew. It sounds
maybe
like
so. Yeah, maybe so. And so, I mean, I'm always looking for people that kind of fall within the same tribe or about the, I'm a clean comic. So, and I love Nashville, big fan. And so, it was awesome to be able to start connecting with you guys.
Yeah. And the more that I looked into your background, I saw that you perform in churches, and that was listed on a lot of your bios. And then the kind of more digging I did, it sounds like you still identify as a Christian, correct?
I do. Yeah. Yes, I do. The answer is yes.
Do you find that it makes it more or less difficult to be a comic and a storyteller as a Christian, or do you find that you just have more preferred spots?
That's a good question. I have a podcast that we do, and one of the last episodes was called "The Problem with Clean Comedy." And I've been a comic for 4 years, professionally for 1 year. And I think this is maybe one of the most helpful answers to your question. I don't have a problem with spots. There's not very many places that I am uncomfortable performing. And I get asked pretty regularly to perform at just about any spot. I don't know. I can't think of, there's like a burlesque show in town. They haven't asked me. I don't know if that has anything to do with my religious beliefs, but if they ask me, I guess I'd have to think about it. I probably would do it. Yeah, I think those guys are nice. What I have found and is surprising is that how hard it is to promote those shows. So I have a fan base, and they expect something specific from me. So if I say, hey, I'm performing at, whatever, and it's like 5 filthy comics, and then me, it's taken me a while to kind of figure out how do I promote that show, because I don't think it's appropriate for me to just steal the stage time.
Right.
There's a reason they're asking me to perform. It is because I'm funny, but they're also asking me to bring people. And so learning how to navigate being able to fulfill that responsibility, because I do think it's a responsibility if you're going to be part of a community within comedy. Absolutely. And also be true to my fan base and not lead them astray.
Right.
And especially anybody new.
Right.
So, and I figured it out. I have an email blast every week, and there's just little asterisks that says not a clean show. I do. There's a couple of comics that are so far ahead of me that fall within the same situations. And so I listen to their podcast and hear them talk about it. Like Dustin Nickerson's a clean comic. And I heard him the other day say, hey, I'm on the Adam Carolla podcast. It's not a clean podcast, just so you know. And, for me, that's fine. I'll listen to the podcast, but he's got some people who won't. And
Right.
so I think, on the business side of being a comedian, you kind of take those situations as they come and just ask yourself, how do I navigate it? And and then, the truth is, clean is green. I get more opportunities than everybody else just being a clean
Yes,
comic. Dirty comics
exactly.
can't perform in churches. They can't perform in situations that are not friendly,
Right.
or family friendly. Corporate events, the majority of them are going to be at least
Television.
PG-13. Yeah,
I've seen a lot of
television.
people who they've been doing comedy for 20 years and they will never be on Just for Laughs or anything like that because they
Mhm.
can't leave certain words out of their set.
Yeah,
Um,
dry bar. I mean, that's obviously a
yep.
big one, and a lot of people, takes a long time to figure out how to do a clean
Yeah,
set. So I
absolutely.
don't know. That was a lot of words to
No,
answer
no,
your
I
question.
enjoyed it. Yeah, and I think a lot of people also, I think one of the things that is a little bit difficult about clean comedy is a lot of times people think clean comedy means basically like children's comedy or like
Mhm.
PC comedy
Yeah.
when, for example, our definition is no sex, no gratuitous drug sets,
Mhm.
and no foul language.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, for example, I don't consider myself a strictly clean comic, but I also don't tell dirty jokes. So it's very
Mm.
easy for me to do clean shows or to like alter my sets to be on clean shows because I legitimately don't tell dirty jokes. I
Yeah.
think, like, for example, I think I have one set about drugs that is about why I don't do drugs, but
Mhm.
because it mentions a bunch of drugs, I can't, say it on certain shows or like
Mm.
I might like once I tripped and I said the word shit when I was going up the stairs, so
Mhm.
that's like technically not clean. But yeah, so I think being a clean comic is very important because you open up your more opportunities for yourself as opposed to
Mm.
just trying to have like the moral high ground,
It's
about
true.
everybody's.
Something I think is interesting. I opened up for a New York comic named Daniel Simonson, at the Blue Whale Comedy Festival last year, and he's in New York, and clean is not as important.
Right.
And someone mentioned to him that I was a clean comic, and he was like, "What is clean?"
Right.
And I was just like, "Whoa, that's crazy! Like, I haven't really heard any comics say that." And so the idea, and like for me to say, like, "Yeah, there's no swearing," it's like, none at all. I was just like, "Not really, no."
Yeah.
It's just like,
Yeah.
"Whoa," and so I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. And so then you were raised Christian as well? Have you always been
Mhm.
Christian? Is that what denomination were you in growing up?
Yeah, I guess I have always been Christian. I mean, I guess the clearest terminology is non-denominational. Was the church the kind of church that I grew up in, or full gospel is what they would call it. It's not a denomination, basically.
Right.
And yeah, so my father was a pastor,
Oh,
and
wow.
so the answer is, yeah, I've pretty much always been a Christian. I grew up, and I really can't remember a day in my life where we weren't talking about God or talking about Jesus, or that wasn't a big part of my life. And yeah, so my parents were ministers. In fact, my parents, the first job they had when I was a kid was they were traveling children's ministers, and so
Interesting.
we lived for about maybe 4 years. We had a house, but we lived on the road, which is probably why I'm a comic now. But
Yeah.
in a conversion van, driving from church to
Wow.
church, putting on what would be a kids crusade or a church service for kids and families. And so we roll up and unload a big puppet stage made out of PVC pipe, and we had these big trunks full of puppets and object lessons and magic tricks and things like that. So my dad would teach kids about Jesus, and then my mom would sing songs or do the praise and worship. And then the older I got, when I got to about 4 or 5, I could start helping, and so I would be like in a story, or I'd be backstage helping him with the puppets. And yeah, that lasted until I was about 6, and it was a pretty. So by the time I was 6, I'd been to like every state except for Hawaii and Alaska, because we were just always on the road. We had one of those vans that it had like the television. It was
Yeah.
like to go the television net, but it didn't
Yeah.
work
That's
because
funny.
it had an antenna, but like it would never pick up anything. So,
That's really
and
funny.
we it was before VCRs. If there had been
Wow.
a VCR in there, my life would have been changed.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Wow. And so Would you say that you are still non-denominational? Has that changed for you in terms of what you believe within Christianity?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't ever say that. So it's funny to for that to. I haven't used the term non-denominational in a while. And I honestly, when I was a kid, I think I thought non-denominational was a denomination.
Yeah, it kind of becomes one, almost like when
Right.
people vote like bipartisan. It's kind of its own
Yeah.
party now.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, yeah, sure. I'm non-denominational. Just I don't subscribe to a specific denomination. I'm not Baptist or Methodist or anything like that. And although there's a lot of pastors and authors that I follow that are, Catholic and I'm trying to think, or Presbyterian, things like that. I think when I was a kid, I thought that it was like the full gospel guys. We're the ones who are doing it right, and the Baptists, they're pretty close, but they're a little wrong, and the Methodists,
Yep.
they're kind of weird too, and the
Yeah.
Pentecostals, they don't even, their clothes are weird.
Yeah.
And the older I've gotten, the more I've just kind of lumped them all together and just been
Right.
like, yeah, we've got some different. I mean, even me, I'm non-denominational. I've got different traditions
Yeah.
than other people. I observe the Sabbath, which is technically a Jewish tradition. But yeah, I would. I mean, when people ask me, I say I'm Christian, and I guess I kind of stop there. I guess.
Yeah.
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 Has there ever been a time where it was difficult for you to identify as a Christian? Whether like it was something in like media or morality, or maybe you just weren't sure where you stood?
Man, that's a good question. Has there ever been a time where it's been difficult to identify as a Christian? I would say the short answer is no. The longer answer is there have been many moments when it has been hard to identify as, maybe this is what you're asking, to identify as part of this group of
Mhm.
people
Yes.
globally.
Yeah.
Within my church, like just people, and it's based on people being jerks,
Yeah.
or me not understanding the decision a person would make, or someone making a poor choice morally, just not even based off of my Christian beliefs, but just a poor choice morally. It can be hard. I'll say it like this. I get sad. There were things that came out today about just some prominent leaders within Christianity. That is it hard to be a Christian when that happens? No, it's not. I'm pretty grounded in my faith, like very grounded. Does it make me sad and angry? Yeah, it does. And that sucks. And it really isn't about, it isn't specifically about what the person did as much as how it taints the what I believe to be true.
Mhm.
And it just puts up this wall for people. So when you see a Christian leader make a especially horrendous moral failure, and having been placed on a pedestal, or whether it was through culture or they did it themselves or whatever. Let's just say they're a pastor. A pastor
Yeah.
is Paul talks about it. You're held to a higher standard. I mean, he's very clear in the New Testament about saying, like, don't want to be like the kind of leader that I am, because you don't understand what is expected of you. And so you get a pastor and they're on a really high pedestal. Maybe let's just call it a responsibility pedestal. Like they have a responsibility to model Christ, and then they fall. Well, immediately there are a very large number of people who say, "Yep, knew it wasn't true. Yep, they were supposed to be like the advocate for Jesus. They couldn't even do it."
Right.
Or take it a step further and they say, "Well, that's a sham," and that breaks my heart. And because I mean, ultimately, I don't believe that it's a sham. I do believe that I believe in Jesus. I believe uh, I believe in God. Obviously, if I believe in Jesus,
Yeah.
and I do believe that there is believe there's a model that Christ has set for us that is that allows for human flourishing. And whenever an individual, myself included, I just don't have a prominent position. Whenever an individual falls at such great distance, like so many people we've seen in the last decade or so, then it people allow themselves to be convinced that it's just not true, and that sucks. That sucks. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know what your question was anymore. But that's what I have to say about that.
Have you ever noticed that people treat you differently before and after finding out you're a Christian? Like, especially as you've been involved in comedy?
A lot of people do have that story. I do not have that story,
Well, that's
and
good.
I think it's a key. I think there is a key reason for it. I am not after anything.
Right.
I you hear stories of pastors. I used to be a pastor, and you hear stories of pastors who are flying under the radar, and we're talking to someone, and then one day they say, they have some sort of like Hallmark movie moment where they're just like, all your problems could be solved by this one thing, and it's like, you're a pastor, and then like everything changes. And a lot of times in those situations, you just find that there's just an ulterior motive. I don't have an ulterior motive at all. I have one motive, and that is to love everyone. And that goes from the most important person in my life, who is my wife, Diana, and my kiddos, all the way down to you, who, this is the first time we're meeting face to face. So that's it. And that doesn't change whether I'm a Christian or not. And it doesn't change whether I'm a pastor. I don't think I'll ever be a pastor again, but if something like that was to happen, like that's just not my thing.
Right.
And there are people who will, they get into situations that are pretty dire, and they do know that I am a very prayerful individual, and they'll reach out and they'll say, would you pray for me? And the answer is absolutely. But I don't even know if that's my goal. My goal is just, I love Jesus, and I am grateful. I am eternally grateful for what he did for me. And so I want to just be that same light to everyone around me. And I am not on this war path of like, I'm going to get everybody to start loving Jesus. Listen, if no one ever comes up to me and says, hey, would you consider talking to me about Jesus? If nobody ever does that, I'm fine. That's totally fine. But it would break my heart if people said Adam is a jerk.
Yeah.
And
right.
I don't want to be around him. And unfortunately, I'm 41 years old. There are people that I've been jerks to, and I'm trying to make up for it. So
if you're not kept up at night by a random memory of a time you were a jerk to somebody, then you're not a human being, or you're lying. Those are like the two options.
True. Yeah, that's true.
And so what is it about Christianity or God or Jesus that has made you say, I am comfortable knowing for a fact that this is true for me? Was it an event or?
Yeah, it just makes the most sense to me. It's really hard to explain it any other way than that. I'm deeply rooted in it. I've been a Christian for well over 30 years, and when I think, let's just go foundationally. I cannot believe that we are here by accident. That just doesn't make any sense to me. It's too complicated for me. Now, I understand that I totally get that there are a lot of people that believe in the Big Bang Theory or believe in the idea of evolution differently than the way I obviously believe in evolution because it is scientific. But
that was going to be my next question.
Right. In the idea, I do believe that things evolve. But the idea that, that we started out as, I don't know, whatever, like there are different versions of it, but the most basic, well-known is that we started out as a monkey and have evolved into human. I have a hard time believing that. I have a really difficult time believing that this is an accident. I think the fact that love exists just, for me, is a concrete reason enough to know or to think or to believe that, okay, this is by design. Okay, so that's where I'm starting. And I think it was something that's important and I didn't learn this until I was in my 30s, is that people who debate the existence of God far too often fail to figure out if the person they're debating with is at the same place foundationally.
Okay.
It's really not any different than politics. Like, I'm, I have more liberal beliefs about political things and agendas than my mother. My mother's a baby boomer, and I'm Gen X, or right on the line of millennial. She's far more conservative. Okay, so for us to get into an argument or a conversation about, specifically an argument about something political, I don't see it going anywhere positive, because
Right.
we're not starting on the same place,
Right.
right? Yeah, whether she believes that Trump's God's gift to the nation, and I don't, or I do, or whatever it is, like we're not in the same spot. So that's an issue, okay? And I think that far too often we just like graze over that, and we think that we're just gonna like bully someone into submission, into what
Yeah.
eventually I'm gonna say something, they're gonna see my side. If you're not starting foundationally, yeah, if you move on, this is not gonna go anywhere that you want it to. You're just
So
gonna
what
get
if
mad.
you are starting out foundationally? So like, for example, you and I, similar in
Yeah,
age, similar geographical background and location,
yeah.
similar jobs, right? How would that then be easier, I suppose, to debate than somebody who is from like a different generation?
Well, I think I'm talking a little bit more just like what you consider to be truthful. So like, let's just say if like, I believe in God, I believe God created humankind.
Mhm.
Um, if you don't, well, that's just right out of the gate. We're gonna have a hard time. I'm gonna have a hard time convincing you of
Right.
what I believe, right? And
Sure.
that's just like elementary level. So I I think that starting there is probably. I'm just realizing as I'm getting off of this, I can't even remember the question you asked me.
Oh, I was
What
just
was it?
saying, we were talking about foundations being different, making it difficult to debate Christians and atheists.
Yeah.
But if we start on a more even keel, and I just used us as an example,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
how might that change the outcome of the debate? Or even if it doesn't change the outcome, how might that change how the debate goes or how the conversation is had?
So I think um my goal is different. I think as I've gotten older, my goal has changed. I'm
Got
not out to convince anyone anymore.
it. So no
I
like proselytizing or anything like that.
No, 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 not anyone. Not anybody who's just like,
Not like
uh,
unsolicited arguments.
yeah, definitely not that. I'm not. Yeah, I'm not a Facebook prophet. I don't have a desire to try to ram my beliefs about Jesus down your throat. I believe in. I have a vast knowledge. I was a pastor for years, so I have a vast knowledge of the Bible. And I preached 100 sermons,
Right.
and probably 1,000 now that I think about it. And that's a different deal. These are people that would like to hear about this thing, and I have information about it. And so like, we're starting the same foot. But when it comes to like just you and I as an example, I'm not looking to like change your mind at all. I am into getting to know you, and I am into us becoming friends and you getting to know me.
Yeah.
So if you want to have a conversation about, Adam, what do you believe about Jesus? And I'm going to be like, oh yeah, I'll tell you all day. And you know what? At the end of it, if you're like, that's silly, I just be like, oh yeah, okay, well, you want to go to an open mic?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I think I remember the very beginning of your question was just like, what was it about Christianity that like really got me
Yeah.
into it?
That
And
sold you.
that sold me. It's this. I have a belief that, and it does require an immense amount of faith, but I have this belief that we were created, and I do believe, after 41 years of living and reading the Bible and having conversations and reading books about it, then I've just come to the conclusion that, you know what, I do think God exists. I do think that he made us. I do think that we really, really screwed it up in the beginning, just humanity. And I believe that he had a plan from the beginning, and it's Christ. And so I'm gonna follow him. And I think when it comes to Jesus, I came to a crossroads where I had to say, look, I got to believe everything about this guy, or I got to believe nothing, because he's either God or he is a crazy person.
Right.
And I don't think that I can take a little bit from him if I believe that he's a crazy person.
Right.
Because it's a pretty crazy thing to say that I'm God. And I've settled in my heart. I probably did it in my late 30s. I've settled in my heart, you know what? I think he is God. And so I'm going to do what I believe that he said to do. And like I said, it requires an immense amount of faith. You can throw so many holes into my argument. And I think at the end of the day, I would just say, I can't prove to you why I believe this, but I can tell you why I believe it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and I think there's a respectable honesty there, as opposed to people who just kind of pretend like they have the right answer all the time and they just filibuster until you don't ask them any more questions. I think there's definitely like a respectable honesty in being like, that's a great question. I don't actually know, but I know that it makes sense to me enough that that's what I believe.
I think one of the things that I realized about myself pretty early on is that I am not a very good debater. I'm not good with my wife at debating. I am not quick-witted. Like comedy shows, like doing like an insult, like an off-the-cuff
like a
insult
roast.
show.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I require planning.
Right.
And so I just had to settle a long time ago. I'm never going to be in a conversation and I'm not in that many debates about Jesus, but I'm never going to be in a conversation with someone. And then I say, oh yeah, well, guess what? Jesus said this. And then they're just like, oh my gosh, my mind is blown. I don't even know how you did that.
I have changed my entire opinion based on this one thing you said.
I know. If anyone changes their opinion about what they believe about Jesus, on anything about me, then I would hope that it would be that Adam's he said he loved God, and man, he loved me. And then if I can do that, then I'll feel pretty proud of myself. I'll be happy with that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like I remember when I was most active in church, a lot of times people would try to say, don't try to force the fact that you're a Christian on people. Let them get to know you and get to love you and get to like you as a person, and then find out you're a Christian and want to know how they can be in that. They can be like that too. They can be likable and fun and seem like an honest person, which I always thought was a good idea.
Yeah, I do like that. I would say that I think that I have two caveats to it. Number one, nearly impossible if you live on social media for someone to not find out you're a Christian.
We're talking early aughts. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one thing. The second thing is I do still think that comes with a hint of agenda. And my agenda in my life is not to convert people.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. You're right, though. There's still the agenda there. It's just a little sneakier.
Yeah, my agenda is just like, it's the same thing with my kid. I just want my kids to know that dad loves them. Like that's the number one thing.
Yeah.
And my hope is that they'll come to Christ when they're older, because they're very young. One of them's not even born yet. That sounded weird. Where my wife is pregnant. That's why she's not born yet. But my hope is that, number one, they would just say, "Dad loves me."
Yeah.
And then when the conversation, when they realize why I love them so much, then they would know it's because of Jesus. So, that's the only thing. Because I grew up in the same sort of thing as you, like in youth group. It's like just I don't want to be like this silent assassin for Jesus. I don't know that I like, and I don't see that.
Although I think that would be kind of a cool club, the silent assassin.
I'd like to be a silent assassin, but maybe a silent assassin in a comedy. There you go. I would like.
That would be cool. Now you mentioned that you do believe that things evolve, which I think is a really good sign.
Right.
What I've heard, so I feel like modern Christians, especially as especially as America leans more and more non-denominational, we're seeing this big shift where people are no longer identifying as Baptist, Catholic,
Yeah.
Presbyterian. There's a big secular movement going on where they're either identifying as non-denominational or non-religious at all in droves. What, in your opinion, makes evolution of all other things possible while still believing that men was created in God's image and we haven't changed?
For me, there are just a lot of, I have a lot of marked moments in my life where I see what I've learned from the Bible coming true.
Yeah.
One of them is the way that we treat other people.
Mhm.
I don't see a lot of, um, in outside of Christianity, I see a lot of subjective love. It based on whether, I mean, you get really liberal, and the way that you love someone is kind of based on the way that you feel right now. And that is really close, or it's like in line with like, I got to be true to myself. Like, is that, I'm trying to think, is that yeah, just the idea of like, you be you, or find my truth, that sort of thing. I think that's a really liberal view of the way that we love people, because it is ultimately beginning with me and the way that I interpret the situation right now. With the way that I see Christ model love, it turns my truth into his truth. And so suddenly, the way that I love people is not subjective anymore. It's based on the way that he has modeled for me to love people. So this is I think this is the best example that I can give. I've been married for 13, almost 14 years, 13 years.
Wow.
And I think I be true to myself. Subjective love would at times allow me to leave my wife based on the way that she is asking me to behave within our marriage, just like, the way that I follow my goals in comedy, or my television show writing, or something like that. And I think that's a really dangerous kind of love,
Right.
because I think it's ever changing. I think it's a target that you will never hit. But
It's conditional.
It's super conditional. It's super conditional, and ultimately, it's conditional on like the way that I feel right
Mhm.
now, or like the way that I'm kind of interpreting the situation. But I think with Christ's model, he says, die to yourself, put others before you, and ultimately put Christ in the driver's seat. And so he's number one. The other people around you are number two, and then you're second to them. When I see that modeled correctly, I don't see it failing. I
Got
see it being hard, very hard.
Yeah.
It's very
Oh, yeah.
hard for me to do
Yeah.
all the time. But I don't see it failing, because I think that what you end up with is I think you end up with a perfect love. I think if Christ is what I believe, Christ modeled a perfect love. I'll never get there because I'm human and I'm full of sin. I have an evil heart, but if I can do everything I can to be like Jesus and to model that love, I see historically and culturally things being positive for human flourishing. And so that is an example of something that I see, that when I look at it, I go, yeah, I think this Christianity thing is right.
Yeah.
I think people are the problem, including myself. But when I look to what Jesus has asked us to do, if we could do it perfectly, I would say, yeah,
It's
this
a
is a good thing.
perfect love, not an easy love.
Well, it's not easy at all. I mean,
Right.
it's
And
incredibly
so
difficult.
in non-religious marriages and relationships, what do you think it is that makes them successful and last for a very long time without the idea that God is in the driver's seat?
I think some people are just really good at putting other people first.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
just good at loving people. Yeah.
I do. I think that it's really, I think marriage is hard,
Oh
Christian or
yeah.
not. And I think that, um, for me, I'm very blessed to have what I consider a true north, a North Star, that whenever there is tension in my relationship with my wife, which there is plenty,
Yeah.
I can go to the Bible, or I can go to what I know about Jesus, and I could say, I think the problem with this is my own selfishness. That's been a guiding light for me. I don't think everyone. Um, I think most people do need that. I think the problem with most people's marriages is their own selfishness, but I think there are just a good amount of people that are just really good at putting their spouse first.
Right.
And I'm not one of them.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
trying. I am
Yeah.
trying. Yeah.
It's a full-time job, but you're getting there.
It is a very full-time job that I did not know, but it is very true. Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
there anything about atheism or non-religious people that you've always just wanted to ask them, like how is this a thing, or why do you think this, or why do you not think this thing?
Yeah, I believe this. I believe everyone has a God, and whether you believe it's a deity, or the God that I believe in, or something, I think that everyone has something sitting on the throne of their heart.
Hmm.
And honestly, I don't know that I don't know anyone who could. I don't know that anyone could have a good argument that that's not true, because there are. Is there anyone who doesn't have something at the center of who they are? Like, I don't think so. Otherwise, they're a dead person, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Everyone is about something,
Hmm.
right? And so in Christianity, I believe, or just let me just say, in my own life, I believe something. There is something that is in the driver's seats, something that I am pointing to, something that I am about. I wish that I could say my whole life it has been Jesus, but regularly I look at my own heart and I'm just like, oh man, you know what it is today? It's comedy. I am putting comedy above everything, or it's my
Yeah.
television show, or it's opportunity. That's a really hard one for me. Anytime I
Opportunity is
get
a huge one.
Yeah, anytime I get opportunity to do something amazing, like, it's hard to not pass that up. I think everybody has that problem, or I think everybody has that situation. Everyone
Yeah.
is making their life about something. Everyone has a God, everyone has an idol. And so I think if I don't know, I'm not friends with a lot of people who are like, I am an atheist. I'm friends with a lot of people who say I don't know. And
Mm.
and
So more like agnostic.
yeah, that or even they're just like, it might be God, I just don't know, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of comedians are like that, because a lot
Right.
of comedians have been burned by the church. I think I would ask an atheist, do you feel that? And what is it for you? I would just, and it's going to be a different answer for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
For a lot of, look, it's going to be, there's a pretty short list. It's going to be success, money, sex, power. I don't know what else exists in this world.
I
Yeah.
would say morality.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Morality. So I don't know if I told you this. I'm an atheist, but grew up Baptist Christian, non-denominational.
I'm gonna have to end this conversation.
You're like, I'm over. This is it. Well, I never want people to think I like sprung it on them, but it just occurred to me. I don't think I told you that.
Is this your way? Were you just getting me to like you, and then letting me find
And
out?
then working my magical evil powers. No, I would say when I was younger, it was absolutely success, money, and which is odd because when I was younger, I was actually much more religious. But I will, if I'm being honest with myself, God was never my driving
Yeah,
force.
that's very
I
common.
loved God and I believed in God and I followed the rules that you were supposed to follow in order to call yourself like that at that point a Christian.
Yeah,
But if I had to be honest, at the time it was comedy, it was success, it was opportunity.
yeah,
And I think the older I get, the pandemic shutting everything down really made me rethink what I was prioritizing, because I
yeah,
realized I'd been doing comedy, I think, for 13 or 14 years at that point, and I lost everything literally in a single day.
Yeah.
And I realized that all of that hustling did not matter. And, at the time we didn't know if it was coming back or not. We had no
Oh,
idea.
yeah. We
And
thought it
so
would also, we just thought at one point we thought it would be like 2 weeks.
yeah, yeah. Once, like, at the point where we realized this was like a thing that was lasting longer than the summer, and we were all like, "Oh no,"
Yeah.
I really reprioritized what I considered my drive and my success, because I realized, like, I had hustled, I had grinded, I had, like, befriended people I thought I needed, yada yada yada. I'd done all of the stuff you thought you're supposed to do, and we all lost it at the exact same time. Just started at
Yeah.
zero. And so now I honestly think it's morality. I think it's, can I go to sleep tonight and know for a fact that I hurt nobody today intentionally? Or
Yeah.
if I did I apologize to them, and did I mean it? Um, and if I were to die, what would my eulogies be? And would they say I was a good person and
Mm-hmm.
that I helped anybody?
Yeah.
And when I was younger, I don't know that I could have those kinds of eulogies. I know that there were people that would say, "Oh, she was nice, she was really funny," but I
Yeah.
don't know that people could tell a story about how I helped them personally
Mm-hmm.
in any
Yeah.
way. Um, and so I would say, for me personally, morality. But I think you're right. I think a lot of people are driven by the things that you mentioned.
Yeah. So, oh man, I have so many problems with your eulogy, but I wouldn't normally tell people that, except that we're having this conversation about
Yeah.
religion. So, I have another question that I would ask. I think I would ask, what are you? What is where are you finding your definition for good person?
For
Because
my
yeah.
personal definition of a good person, and this is just for me, is somebody who helps others in a way that doesn't benefit them in the long run. So, like, am I helping people and putting it on TikTok, or am I helping people and not mentioning it, but this person and I know that I've
Sure.
helped them?
Sure.
Like, am I reaching out in my friends' DMs and, like, congratulating them privately, or am I making a big show on social media so that people make sure I make sure people know that
Uh-huh.
we're connected?
Yeah.
Um, but I think being
I,
a good
I hear a lot of there. You still have a lot of deep Christian roots in there, because there's a lot that some of those are pretty interesting from a biblical trend.
Well, and I think also, something that I have always believed is that there isn't actually that much different between a lot of religious people and a lot of atheist people.
I can see that.
Obviously, on both sides, there are the loud, militant ones that don't represent everybody else and oftentimes make the entire group not look very good. On both sides, you've got Westboro Baptists, you've got the people that get on YouTube and they're like, "Atheist destroys," because, like, we don't like those people. They're not good people.
Yeah, which
Um,
by the way, I will say, it's another amazing example of of people not being on the same spot foundationally,
right,
because all they're doing is communicating to it's just an echo chamber of the
right,
same
right.
dang people,
But
and
I
I
have
don't see how
found
that benefits anyone.
Right, and I have found, so this is, I think, episode 75 or 78 or something like that. Um, I have found in talking to people for the last year or so, year and a half, that a lot of us want the same things. We just believe the way to get there is different.
Hmm.
So, a lot of people who consider themselves militant atheists don't want the homeless people to starve. We don't
Sure.
want anyone to suffer. We don't want anyone to feel lost, or like they don't have a familial group that they can lean on for
Hmm.
support.
Yeah.
We want things like, better healthcare in this
Hmm.
country, and I think the only difference is Christians say, I'm going to pray to God and ask him for guidance on how I can be a better person and how I can somehow positively contribute to the things that Christianity promotes. And atheists say, I have to figure out how I'm going to contribute and help with these things. So, like, the 10 commandments, a lot of those are just really good advice. Like,
Hmm.
I think it's a great idea not to covet your neighbor's wife. I think it's a great
Hmm.
idea to honor thy father and thy mother if they are, respectable individuals who weren't abusive to you when you were younger.
Hmm.
Um, and I think we find that when we approach things as a conversation as opposed to a debate, at the core of what it is we're trying to either to accomplish, or if we're not trying to accomplish anything, we're just trying to live our lives in a certain way, it's a lot of very similar things, and there's a lot of things that we would actually find common ground on. The only difference is who we are crediting at the end of the day, if that makes sense.
No, I totally understand where you're coming from. That's funny. I don't know how to respond to that. Probably because I haven't really heard anybody communicate it that way before.
I've just had a lot of time to think about it. And I spent years as a debater, so I'm used to like
also
that.
75 podcasts of talking about this. I just tell dumb stories on my podcast.
Oh, I've got a different one for that. But
okay, yeah.
But
you know what I think about that is I think you're right. I think that there are a lot of similarities when it comes to morality. If we go back to what you said at the beginning about like Christians saying, I'm going to pray about that. I have a little bit of an issue with that because
sure.
I think not with you, with a Christian who would say that.
Get a soundbite though where you're saying you have beef with me so I can use it to advertise this episode.
I got a lot of beef with you, lady.
There it is.
I think that Christ is pretty clear about a lot of things, a lot of the way that we act.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I think prayer is incredibly important. I think prayer is as important in my relationship with Jesus as having a conversation with you is in my relationship with you. And we're not going to have one if we don't talk. And that's what I believe the power of prayer does. However, I think far too often people, all types of people, use prayer as we use prayer in place of doing their due diligence to find out what Christ would have them do in the first place. It doesn't require me praying a lot to know that I should serve my community. Right. Honestly, if you ask me, like I'm not active in serving our homeless population. But if you ask me to do something right now, I know what I would do.
Right.
I know that some of the organizations around here that are serving those who need food or housing or whatever, like that's what Christ has asked us to do, is fill a need, find a hole and fill it. And I know where I could do that. And so like that sort of thing doesn't require prayer. For me, what requires prayer is when I don't have wisdom, when I don't know what to do in a specific situation that doesn't very obviously have a very clear answer,
like a scriptural answer.
That or just like a regular human answer. I think one of the biggest problems with one of the biggest issues with Christians is they act like they don't live on this planet. But so what, I mean, you grew up in church. What is it? People say kingdom minded. So the kingdom of God is what I am a citizen of, and I am just here temporarily. This is just my earth suit. And I think that is a load of trash. Because yes, I do believe that there is a kingdom of God. And I do believe that, I mean, we can get into the afterlife on another podcast, but I do believe that there's an afterlife that is reminiscent of the Garden of Eden, and it is where many evils will be made whole. However, I believe that I am a 41-year-old man who lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma, with Diana Bush and Luna Bush and Ira Bush, and I live on this planet, and I have a responsibility here. And because of that, there are already things I know that I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
Like I already know, like, you don't have to tell me that I'm not supposed to cheat on my wife, or that I'm not supposed to steal, or that I'm supposed to pay my taxes and my bills on time. Like, that's just normal stuff. And so I think too often when people are saying, I'll pray about that, what they're elevating themselves to this level of like better than, when we are all humans, all of us. We're all humans, and my belief is we all have good intentions, and we all have an evil heart. And depending, for me, the best practice I have for combating that evil heart is to point to Jesus. That's what I believe is the way for humanity.
Yeah.
But regardless of that, I am a human just like you, and I am just trying to live on this planet.
Yeah. Like, I just work here, man. Like, I'm just here.
That's true.
Yeah.
I didn't ask to be here, and here I am.
And I think that's actually one more example of things that we have in common. This idea that how we treat our lives now, how we treat the world now, how we treat people now, what we're doing currently to either better the world or at least better our immediate, circumstances. I think that's another thing that both groups prioritize or should prioritize. And it's often just not recognized because what we focus on are the
Yeah.
differences. And so I completely agree with everything you said, because I think, oh, sorry if you can hear my dog
Oh,
howling in her
he
sleep.
doesn't. He's not
Uh,
into it.
yeah, no. But I think, hold on a second. She has
No,
active dreams.
listen, I get kids. It's fine.
Yeah. And so I think this idea that, like, what can we do right now? And I think that inherent, I know it's bad to cheat on my spouse. Like, I know that it's bad to steal. I know that it's better if I share usually. I know that I should be volunteering. And I don't mean like at a homeless shelter, just in general, to like help people when I know that I can be of assistance to them in the way that I know how. How do I go about doing that? Right.
Mhm.
And I think, like you said, Christians often have a very clearly spelled out way of how they should go about doing that. And a lot of the clearly spelled out ways that you follow are also clearly spelled out ways that we follow. The only difference is we aren't getting those ideas from the Bible, if that makes sense. Like, as human beings, we have always prioritized things that help the tribe exist for longer because that is just what we needed to do, right? Like, we weren't
Mhm.
going to steal from one another in our same tribe because we're probably going to die sooner if one of us starves, things like that. And
Mhm.
so I think you've made a good point that there are inherent things that we know we should do, and there are things that are a little bit more nuanced. And the difference between the two groups there is one group has an individual that they go to
Mhm.
spiritually, emotionally, literally, to ask for guidance, and the other group, maybe they converse among themselves. Like, I'm lucky because I've met enough people through this podcast that I can send an email to somebody who's a psychologist or a
Mhm.
scientist of some sort and say, like, hey, what do you think about this? um, and then there's also the afterlife, which I think is like a huge difference between the two groups.
Yeah.
Are you ever worried that heaven will, like, not be what you thought it was? Like,
I'm
it'll let you down a little bit?
I'm not worried that it'll let me down. I do believe that it will not be what I thought it was.
Yeah.
I don't think that. Again, this is just something that I do have a lot of faith in. I don't know that my human brain can comprehend or understand what it is.
Mhm.
Um, but I have a really, really difficult time believing that it stops when I die.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to, if I believe what Jesus said, then he said, I've prepared a place for you with my Father. And so there are a lot of, I mean, you can get really weird and very Nick Cagey about it if you get into some of the fictional, like, Left Behind books and just, other. I've read books about people who said that they had an experience in heaven, that sort of thing, and they're great. That, that's fine. No, not, that they're probably, there's probably something there. I think what I've just settled in my heart is that whatever it is, I will be with my creator. And
Mhm.
I believe that my creator wants good for me. And so I
Right.
am going to trust that it is good.
Yeah.
Have I ever thought about, like, what if this isn't real?
Yeah.
Sure, but I don't know. I don't dwell on it very long because I just made a decision to settle this in my heart,
Yeah.
and that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. And I think when we're confident about things, especially things as big as like the idea of morality, there's always that part of us that is like, but what if? Like, but what,
Sure.
like, I still pray on a plane when there's turbulence. Like, I still ask
Yeah.
God for forgiveness on a plane when it's bumping a little too much, just in case.
Yep.
But is the idea of nothing, like, is the idea of literally nothing, scary, or just not fun to think about?
I don't know that. Is it scary or not fun to think about? I don't know. No, it's not fun to think about. I mean, it's not very much to think about there. It's just like, what if there's
Yeah.
nothing? And then it's
Yeah,
kind of
I
over.
guess that's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's not really nothing
Um,
to think about.
there's not really anything to think about. Um, I kind of go back right at the beginning of the podcast. You were asking, like, have there been like moments in my life that like did something happen where it really caused me to believe in God? And I think I even kind of said no, but I guess that's not totally true because there have been marked occurrences where I've looked at what I believe and I've looked at what's happening within humanity and thought, yeah, this lines up. I do think, excuse me, podcast listeners. I do think that I'm on the right track, and uh, so if I believe that, then I got to believe what the Bible says. Again, I made a decision to follow Christ, and I'm choosing to believe everything that he says.
Yeah.
And he says there's an after this life for he and I. And I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna go for it.
Yeah.
That is a requirement of faith. And there's some things I'm just not gonna know for certain. And I can understand how some people would be like, that is insanity. But there are enough marked moments in my life that I have seen God come through, both positively and negatively, getting things that I've wanted or outcomes that I've wanted and not what I've wanted. There's been enough of those to make me a believer, which is where the term comes from, that you are a believer. And so I'm choosing to believe that at the end of this, will we go to heaven? Yeah, I think we will. I think that I also have a different belief about heaven, and this is not based on anything biblical except for what I know about God and the goodness of God. I think there's going to be more people in heaven than we realize. I think in Christianity, there's this idea that if you say the sinner's prayer, and if you say, according to, it's found in Romans 10, that Paul said, the Apostle Paul, he said that if you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. And the phrase saved, as you know, it comes from the idea that like when Adam and Eve sinned, you were excommunicated from a relationship with God. And so Jesus Christ came to save that relationship so that you could be back with God. That there wouldn't be a chasm between you anymore. And so praying that prayer or doing those things would bring you back into relationship. And so and so there are a lot of people that say, if you pray that prayer, you have those beliefs, you will be a Christian. And then there's a lot of Christians that say, yeah, but you also got to live like perfectly for Jesus. And then some people say, well, you also got to make sure that you've confessed all your sins before you die. That's more of some branches of Catholicism. And then some people that believe that like once saved, always saved. I don't know about all that, but what I do believe about Christ and what I do believe about God is he wants as many people with him as possible. And so I think that there are going to be a lot of people with God after they die, a lot more people than we realize. There are family members I've had that have passed away, and they were confessing, I'm doing air quotes if you're listening, confessing Christians, and they were just like a-hole people. And I'm like, you know what? I think they might be up there. I think God might have made it really easy for us to all be reunited in the end.
Yeah.
To be close to him. That's a little tangent that I believe. And I don't have a lot of biblical. The only biblical basis I have for it is that what I see about the character of God is that he is a good God that loves me and loves people. And I think if that's true, he's probably making it pretty simple for us to be with him in the end. So that was
and
Adam's religious tangent.
A religious tangent with Adam. That should be another podcast. There you go. Another idea.
Yeah.
And you joked that some of the beliefs might sound crazy to somebody who's not a Christian, but I will say I have actually understood and related to Christians and Christianity so much more since becoming an atheist than I ever did when I was a devout religious person.
Yeah. What denomination did you grow up in?
So non-denominational Baptist.
Okay.
And my claim to fame is I went to church with the Duggars for a while.
Wait, who are the
19 Kids and Counting people?
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yep.
that whole thing kind of fell apart, didn't it? Isn't it? Yeah, is that
It
right? Yeah, I
sure
don't really
did.
remember.
Sure
Yeah, okay.
did.
Yeah. Well, one of
But
them went to jail or something, I think.
oh yeah, for a
Yeah,
long
okay.
time.
Okay, okay.
But yeah, and so I think because I became an atheist and I then turned around and wanted to have like regular conversations with people, I
Mhm.
think when you separate yourself from something, it becomes a lot easier to accept people's differing opinions about it. So, like when
Yeah.
you're a Baptist, your scope is going to be what Baptist scopes should be, right? And if
Mhm.
somebody says
Yeah.
something different, but also claims to be a Christian, you're going to be like, nope, not in my church, not in my Bible. Like one of us has got to be wrong. But when you're like, I don't actually believe any of it, tell me your version, it's a lot easier to be like, yeah, that actually makes sense. Like I can totally see how that would bring you peace or bring you comfort or why you would do that or
Yeah.
how that would be believable. It's very interesting.
I think what you're speaking to is, and I can relate to this as a young man. I think what you're speaking to is when a lot of us grew up Christian or grew up in
Mm-mm.
the church
Yep.
with a very shallow understanding of what we were actually subscribing to, and
Yes.
because of that, when
Yes.
people would come around us and they would push on it, your
Yep.
identity was just starting to crumble. And because you
Yes.
had built so much of your identity on this Christian thing, you
Yes.
get what would your response be? To get mad, to push
Yes.
those people away.
Yes.
So, and I think that's what ends up happening with a that ends up being the response of a lot of followers of Jesus or Christians, is that they never have this real deep, concrete understanding of what they believe about Jesus. And so, even into their adulthood. And so, I was like that. People would, I mean, it's so funny to talk about, but like somebody might come into the church and they're gay or they are living with their spouse or they're having premarital sex, which are all things that I was against when I was a kid. And
Right.
and it was just, I would just be like, get them out of here, get that sinner out.
Yep. Yep.
And that doesn't shake me anymore.
No.
I just because someone, let's just say, if like I'll just be very honest, I do not believe that you want a soundbite. I don't believe in abortion. I do not think it's appropriate. I for me, I think I do not believe how you can be a follower of Christ and be pro choice. That's me. That's something that I have no problem telling anyone about. We're not talking about it very much, but that's something that I believe. When I was younger, if you came to me and you're like, I'm pro-choice, I would just be like, oh, not even talk to you. I
Yeah.
can't, because I couldn't handle it. Now I have a deep conviction I have such a deep conviction about that if someone comes to me and gets in my face about their belief on a woman's right to choose, I'm like, I get it. I understand where you're coming from. And just the fact that you believe that and I believe this does not mean that I will not be your friend. It
Right.
doesn't shake me at all. I'm happy to hear your arguments. In fact, during this last year, because it's been such a hot topic, and you are welcome to keep this in if you want, or you don't have to. My wife has given me wonderful perspective that I never had before, especially in regards to understanding why so many women would make that decision.
Yeah.
I have such a different understanding and compassion for people who are in that situation, so much more than I did before. And a huge part of that is because I am open to listening to anyone's perspective. And I think growing up Christian, so many people are afraid to allow other
Yes.
people to speak into that. And so I kind
Yes.
of feel like that's what you're
Yeah, I think a lot of people take being asked why they believe something, or a lot of people, when they say a belief and you ask them why, or you ask them a question about it, they take that as you calling them stupid. And
oh, totally.
like I found that with politics, I found that with religion, and they get defensive immediately and they feel like they have to protect their belief.
Oh, yeah.
when you sit and you have a conversation, you might not agree, but at least you know where they're coming from and you understand. It sounds like your wife has done a great job of being like, even though you disagree, like you at least should know what it is you're disagreeing against and what the people who are disagreeing with your point are saying when they are pro-choice, right? When they're making these decisions.
The other thing that I think is just, and I agree with all that, and the other thing that I think is just like foundationally is important is just listening to people,
Yes.
just period,
Yes.
just understanding where people are coming from. I think that is so much more valuable than shunning someone because right out of the gate you don't have. I don't see how that. For one, it goes back to Christ for me. I don't see Christ doing that. If I'm trying to model who Jesus is, I'm not going to do that. And so if I'm not going to do that, that means that I have to make a decision to have a grounding of what I believe to be true and then be comfortable with someone else coming to me and say, I totally disagree with you. And here's why. And me just saying, you know what? This doesn't shake my identity just because you think this. In fact, might help build different parts of what I believe because you're offering something new. Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
would actually argue that somebody who is afraid to hear the opposite of what they believe doesn't actually believe what it is they are touting and is afraid that if they hear something to the opposition, it's going to shake the foundation and it's going to make them question themselves. I think true belief, like actual true belief, is somebody who has heard the opposite of what it is they believe and still has come to the conclusion that what they are thinking is correct for them.
no, I think you're right, and I think I would challenge anyone. My wife hates the phrase challenge because so many preachers say it. I would encourage anyone to that if there's an area, and there have been many areas for me, and probably still are, and I just am not thinking about it right now. But if there's an area that you're uncomfortable having a conversation with someone about, I would just say maybe take some time and really investigate what you believe about that situation, because there's a very good chance that you could have an enlightening conversation that ultimately, and it goes back to the beginning of this podcast, would show the person that you love them. Because I think if you listen to someone, then you are communicating a love, and that's I'm very much into loving people.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the best experiences I ever had was when I was in college and I was on the debate team. And we were told what the topic was, and we were told what side of the argument we were going to be on. We found out when we got to the tournament, like, you're pro this, you're against this. And it forced me to do hours and hours of research on the opposite side, defending the opposite side of something that I thought was a core belief
Man,
that
would
I
I be
had.
bad at that? So I'd be so bad.
But it really opened my eyes, and I feel like I learned so much more from debate than I actually did from college. And I went into college thinking that I was a conservative Republican, and I came
Mhm.
out of college realizing that I was a liberal Democrat the whole time. But because everybody around me was a conservative Republican, I just repeated what they said all the time. And then when people would ask me why, I would just get defensive and shut down the conversation. And I'm not
Yeah,
saying that
well,
to
yeah.
say that all conservative Republicans do that. That was just the way I dealt with things. But the minute
It's pretty
that I
common.
yeah, and I've met Democrats who do that as well. Like, it's not as specific to each party.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
but I'm grateful for the people who sat down and had actual conversations with me to get to the bottom of why it was I believed what I believed, because it turned out I didn't actually believe half of it. And doing
Yeah.
all this research to argue the opposite of what I believed made me realize I actually believed and agreed with a lot more stuff that didn't at all align with what I was saying than I thought,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. And so I think you're right. I think having conversations with people and listening to them and giving them kind of the floor to speak to a certain degree. There's the argument that some people's beliefs are harmful, and that's like a whole other conversation. But to an extent, like, listening to people and letting them speak and hearing them out and hearing why it is they believe certain things can actually teach you a lot about, even if it's about why you still disagree with them. At least you have talking points on, here's what I disagree with. They say this, I say this. They say this, as opposed to just a blanket no, I disagree with them.
Yeah, there's this. I just finished reading this book by this preacher named Timothy Keller. It's called Forgive. It's just about how to forgive people and how Christ models it for us.
It's
And
harder to do than it looks.
yes, it's very hard. One of the things he said is just from a practical standpoint, when you're forgiving someone, is putting yourself in the position of that person and identifying with why they chose to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a really valuable practice for most situations where you're having a conversation with someone that you disagree with. I mean, I guess if you have to forgive someone, that's kind of the epitome of like disagreeing with someone.
Yeah.
So I think understanding why someone would make the decision or come to the conclusion on what it is that they're doing really just helps you identify with another person. And whether you agree with that person or not, religiously or morally or whatever it is, I think it's good to know that about people.
Yes.
Even regardless of it, whether it's affects the way that you believe about something. I think it's just good to know why people tick the way that they tick, because this is what we're doing. We're being a part of a human race.
Yes.
And we all have different things going on.
Yeah.
And I don't want to just assume everyone's an idiot, which is pretty common practice with people. And honestly, I do it too often too. So.
Yeah. I don't assume, but I fear. I'm not going to assume this person is an idiot, but I remain afraid. I remain suspicious.
Well, I wish I was as kind as you, because I'm typically like, that guy's dumb. And then I have a hard check and I'm just like, well, maybe
there are some people where no matter what they say, I'm like, nah, dumb. Like, no, sorry. Well, Adam, I really want to be respectful of your time. I'm having a great conversation, but I realize I've held you like 20 minutes later than I said I would. Where can we find your work? What's coming up for you? What's new? What's going on in your life that we can support and attend and stream?
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. I've had a great conversation too. And if I didn't have to go to an open mic, thankfully it's across the street, I would talk to you for another hour. Most of the podcasts I do, we're just talking about comedy, which is great, but we don't talk about religion very much. I have a special on YouTube. So you can follow me on any of the social medias at Hey Adam Bush, Instagram, TikTok, wherever. YouTube. I have a special on YouTube called A Night of Storytelling and Comedy, which I'm very proud of, and filmed it here in Tulsa. And I have lots of clips, but you can watch the whole special. You can listen to it on Apple Music or stream it on YouTube. And then I have a dry bar special that is coming out this year. I've seen it. I don't know if you know anything about dry bar. It takes a very long time for it to come out, but I've seen it, and I do know that it'll come out this year. So I'm very excited. It's called My Mom is Funnier Than Your Mom. So you can, if you follow me on social media, you'll be able to be one of the first people to see.
And Dry Bar produces exclusively clean content, right?
They do. Yeah. They do. They produce a lot of it.
They do a lot.
Yeah.
And it just never occurred to me until like last year that they only do clean, because every time I would meet a clean comic who was involved in Dry Bar, I'm like, oh, it's just they happen to be clean. And then I'm like, wait a second, I think they only do clean. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of in the name Dry Bar.
Right. I realized that later. I was like, oh, duh. Like,
so I got a Dry Bar special coming out, and then so if you follow me on social media, you'll see that. And then I've got a ton of stuff at heyadambush.com. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Adam, for your time. Thank you for your opinions and your thoughts. And I hope you break a leg tonight, and I hope your special comes out with a bang.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you. And I had a lot of fun.